I still don't know how I ended up writing this. I mean, this Halloween was supposed to be fun, you know? Just me, my wife, friends, and a bunch of silly costumes. A night to get a little drunk, hand out candy, and maybe, if I was lucky, end it in bed with my wife. But man, that's not how it turned out. Not even close. It all started 2 weeks before Halloween. My wife, Emily, came up with this prank idea she thought would be hilarious. She kept giggling as she told me about it over dinner, her eyes lighting up like a kid on Christmas morning. "Let's do something wild this year," she said. "A prank to mess with everyone. Something over the top. It'll be legendary." Emily always had a bit of a mischievous streak. It's one of the things I loved about her. But this time, well, I had no idea just how far things would go. She suggested we invite everyone over for a Halloween party and play a fake cheating prank on our guests. Imagine their faces when they think I'm, you know, cheating on you, she laughed, biting her lip in excitement. She explained it all so casually. At first, I thought it was a little weird, like, who even jokes about stuff like that? But she reassured me, saying it would only be for laughs. Everyone would be in on it. "It'll just be a joke, babe. Lighten up." I remember nodding reluctantly. Maybe it was the wine or how excited she looked, but I thought, sure, why not? It's just a joke. I never imagined I'd regret that decision as much as I do now. So the big night arrives. We decorated the whole house. Fake cobwebs, pumpkins, dim lighting. Emily wore this ridiculous yet somehow sexy witch costume. Short skirt, high stockings, and this sly, mischievous look in her eyes. She was having the time of her life, playing hostess, handing out drinks, and making everyone laugh. I was mostly on candy duty, half listening to her banter with our friends. Then, around 10 p.m., the prank was supposed to start. Emily whispered to me, "Okay, it's showtime." She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and disappeared upstairs with one of our guests, her coworker, Brad. Brad is the kind of guy you instinctively dislike. Tall, muscular, loud, and way too comfortable flirting with my wife. I hated how friendly he was with her, but Emily always brushed it off, saying he was just a harmless friend. "You're being paranoid," she'd say whenever I mentioned it. As the minutes passed, people at the party started noticing that Emily and Brad were both missing. It didn't take long before someone cracked a joke about them sneaking off together. Everyone laughed, but I started to feel this knot in my stomach. This prank wasn't sitting right with me anymore. Then I heard it, a loud, playful moan from upstairs. The whole room went silent. Everyone exchanged awkward glances, and then someone nervously chuckled, trying to break the tension. But the sound came again, louder this time. "Oh, Brad, you're so bad." Emily's voice, clear as day, echoed down the staircase. My heart stopped. People started giggling nervously, glancing at me, expecting me to laugh it off, to say something like, "Relax, guys, it's just a joke." But I couldn't move. I stood there frozen, like my brain had short-circuited. I knew it was supposed to be a prank. I knew that. But hearing it, actually hearing my wife's voice moaning another man's name, it did something to me. Something snapped, and suddenly, I didn't know what was real anymore. The next thing I knew, someone at the party shouted, "Dude, are you gonna let that happen?" More laughter. Nervous. Awkward. The kind of laughter that fills a room when no one knows what to say or do. They were all waiting for my reaction, expecting me to either laugh or storm upstairs. But I just stood there, dumbfounded. I kept telling myself, it's just a prank. It's just a prank. Emily wouldn't do this for real, right? Then Emily and Brad came back down the stairs. She had this smug grin plastered on her face, and her lipstick was noticeably smeared. Brad looked way too comfortable, his arm slung casually over her shoulder like they just shared some private joke. Emily winked at me in front of everyone and said, "Oops, guess the secret's out." The room erupted in laughter, but I felt like I was drowning. I tried to force a smile, but it came out all wrong. My face probably looked like I'd been hit by a truck. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, Brad, this asshole, clinked his beer against mine and said, "Don't worry, bro. She's still all yours. For now." Everyone laughed again. That was the moment it all shifted. I wasn't sure if it was still a prank or if something real had just happened upstairs. I tried to ask Emily, pulling her aside and whispering, This was just a joke, right? Tell me it was just the prank. But she just smiled that smug little smile and said, "Relax, babe, you're overthinking it." Then she kissed me on the cheek and went back to Brad, laughing with him like they shared some kind of inside joke I wasn't part of. That's when the realization hit me. Even if this was just a joke, it didn't feel like one anymore. The rest of the night was a blur. People kept coming up to me, clapping me on the back, telling me how chill I was for going along with the prank. Emily played it all off perfectly, acting like it was no big deal. But every time she glanced at Brad, there was this look, something I couldn't quite explain. It was like I wasn't even there, like I was invisible in my own marriage. When the party finally ended, and the last guest left, I confronted her. "Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What the hell was that?" She looked at me like I was the crazy one. "It was just a joke," she said, rolling her eyes. "You seriously need to relax. Everyone had fun, didn't they?" I wanted to scream, but instead, I just stood there, feeling pathetic. Because the truth was, I didn't even know what I was mad about. Was it the prank? Was it the way she looked at Brad? Or was it the fact that, for the first time in our marriage, I felt replaceable? That's how it started. One stupid Halloween prank. But as I stood there that night, watching my wife laugh with another man, I realized something had shifted between us. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if things would ever go back to the way they were. The next morning hit me like a hangover, even though I barely drank. Emily was in the kitchen, humming like nothing had happened the night before. She flipped pancakes, her hair tied up in a messy bun, acting like it was just another day. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, trying to sort out what exactly I was feeling. Confusion, anger, shame? I wasn't sure. As she slid a plate in front of me, she smiled. "You were such a good sport last night. Everyone thought the prank was hilarious." I stared at her, hoping she'd notice how off I felt. But Emily wasn't reading the room at all, or maybe she didn't care to. She was acting like nothing had changed between us. Like that prank hadn't cracked something inside me that I didn't even know was fragile. "Did you really think it was funny?" I asked carefully, my voice low. I didn't want to start a fight. Honestly, I wasn't even sure what I wanted. I just needed to hear her say it was all pretend. She looked at me with a smirk, pouring syrup over her pancakes. "Of course, it was all in good fun, babe. Everyone was talking about how wild it was. You have to admit, we nailed it. That's the thing, though, we didn't nail anything. If it had been a joke, I should have felt included in it. But instead, I felt like the punchline. And the way she kept laughing it off, dismissing my unease, only made it worse. Throughout the day, I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself I was overreacting. It was a prank. That's all. Just some Halloween mischief. But every time I replayed the night in my mind, I felt that knot in my stomach twist a little tighter. The way Emily looked at Brad, that wasn't a look you gave someone just for a joke. Then the text started. I was sitting on the couch that afternoon when Emily's phone buzzed next to me. It was unlocked, something she never used to do. I didn't mean to snoop, but my curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the screen and saw Brad's name. "Last night was fun. Let's keep it our little secret," winky face. I could feel my heart rate spike. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, but there it was, right in front of me. I stared at the message, trying to convince myself it was just part of the joke. Maybe they were still playing along. Maybe this was just an extension of the prank. But why did it feel so wrong? I confronted Emily about the text later that day, hoping, praying, she'd have an explanation that would make sense. But when I showed her the message, her expression shifted. For a split second, she looked guilty, like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Then, just as quickly, she rolled her eyes and snatched the phone out of my hand. "Oh my God. Are you seriously upset about this? It's just Brad being Brad. You know how he is." Her nonchalance made me feel like an idiot. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe I was overreacting. But the sinking feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. The next few days were strange. Emily acted like everything was normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time I saw her on her phone, I wondered if she was texting Brad. Every time she went out, I wondered if she was meeting him. And every time she laughed at one of his jokes, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. One night, I brought it up again. I told her that the prank had crossed a line for me, that it didn't feel like just a joke anymore. I expected her to apologize, maybe even feel bad for how it had affected me. Instead, she scoffed. "You're being ridiculous. You need to stop being so insecure." Insecure. That word hit me like a slap in the face. I wasn't insecure, at least I didn't think I was. I just wanted to feel respected in my own marriage. But the more I tried to talk to her about it, the more she made me feel like I was crazy for even bringing it up. A week after the party, things hit a breaking point. I came home from work earlier than usual and found Emily sitting on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. When I asked her what was so funny, she turned the screen toward me. It was a photo from the party, the moment. The one where she came down the stairs with Brad, her lipstick smeared, his arm draped over her shoulders. Someone had snapped it and turned it into a meme, captioned, "When your wife's prank goes too far, but now it's too late to stop." She was giggling, completely oblivious to how humiliating it was for me. "That's funny to you?" I asked, my voice strained. She gave me a look that was somewhere between confusion and exasperation. "Oh, come on. You've got to learn how to laugh at yourself." But I wasn't laughing. I felt like I was unraveling, like the ground beneath me had shifted and I didn't know how to find my footing again. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just one bad night, just a stupid prank that had gotten out of hand. But the truth was, things between us were different now. The joke, or whatever it was, had left a crack in our relationship, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't figure out how to fix it. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if Emily even cared enough to try. Days turned into weeks, and that invisible line between Emily and me grew thicker. She went about her life as if nothing was wrong, and I did my best to act like I wasn't spiraling inside. I tried to focus on work, hobbies, anything to distract myself from the nagging feeling that our marriage was slipping through my fingers. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the memory of that night or the image of her cozying up to Brad. The worst part was how dismissive she was. Anytime I tried to talk about what I was feeling, she brushed me off with some version of, "You're overthinking it," or "You need to lighten up." And every time she said it, it felt like she was driving a wedge deeper between us. I didn't even know who to talk to about it. My friends? They were all at the party. They'd probably tell me I was making a big deal out of nothing. Family? I couldn't exactly tell my brother, "Hey, I think my wife's Halloween prank might have been more real than it seemed." So I kept it all bottled up, hoping that, somehow, things would go back to normal. Then, about a month after the party, Emily announced that she was meeting Brad for drinks after work. She said it casually, like it was no big deal, as she tossed on her coat and grabbed her purse. "You're hanging out with Brad?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, just for a couple of drinks," she said with a shrug. "Relax, it's not a big deal." I wanted to argue, to tell her that it was a big deal, that it felt like a betrayal even if she didn't mean it to be. But I knew how that conversation would go. She'd roll her eyes, call me insecure again, and make me feel like the bad guy for even bringing it up. So I let her go. And that's when I realized just how powerless I felt in my own marriage. The hours dragged by after she left. I sat on the couch, my thoughts spinning in 100 different directions. Was it just drinks? Were they really just friends? Or was something else going on? Something I didn't want to admit to myself? I tried to distract myself with TV, but every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped into my throat. I kept checking to see if it was Emily, but it never was. Just spam emails and a couple of work notifications. Nothing from her. Around midnight, she finally came home, her cheeks flushed from alcohol and laughter. "How was it?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "It was fine," she said, kicking off her shoes. "We had a good time. Nothing crazy." She didn't offer any more details, and I didn't ask. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The next morning, things felt off. Emily was distant, distracted. She spent most of the day on her phone, her thumbs moving quickly over the screen. Every time I glanced her way, she tilted the phone just enough to keep me from seeing what she was doing. By the time dinner rolled around, I couldn't take it anymore. "Who are you texting?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "No one important," she said without looking up, but I could feel the lie sitting between us like a wall. A few nights later, I woke up to find the bed empty. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled out of the bedroom, calling her name. I found her sitting on the couch, her phone glowing in the dark as she texted someone. "Emily?" I whispered, my heart pounding. She looked up, startled, as if she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Nothing," she said quickly, locking her phone and slipping it under a pillow. I couldn't sleep, that's all. But the way she avoided my gaze told me everything I needed to know. There was something going on, something she didn't want me to see. The cracks in our marriage were widening, and I felt helpless to stop it. Every time I tried to talk to her, she shut me down. Every time I asked a question, she gave me half an answer. And every time I saw her phone buzz with a new message, I felt that knot in my stomach tighten a little more. I knew I should confront her, demand the truth, but I was scared. Scared of what I might find out. Scared that the prank had been more than just a joke. Scared that I was already too late. The weeks following that night were unbearable. Emily grew colder, more distant, like she was slipping away from me inch by inch. She spent more time out of the house. Work happy hours, gym sessions that ran too long, and random shopping trips she never used to care about. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but in my gut, I knew better. She was pulling away, and I didn't know how to stop it. One night, she came home late again, reeking of perfume and alcohol. I was already in bed, pretending to sleep, but I heard her stumble through the door and into the bathroom. I listened as she ran the sink and brushed her teeth. It was a routine she only followed when she didn't want me to smell the alcohol on her breath. She climbed into bed without a word, facing away from me. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, feeling that gnawing sense of helplessness settle in my chest. How had we gotten here? Just a couple of months ago, we were happy, weren't we? The following morning, I decided I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to give. I needed to know the truth, even if it broke me. So while she was in the shower, I took her phone from the nightstand. My hands shook as I unlocked it. She still hadn't changed the code, almost like she didn't care if I found something. I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding. At first, it was just random conversations with friends, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I saw it. A chat with Brad, hidden under a nickname, B-Man. My stomach dropped. I opened the thread, and the truth hit me like a freight train. Brad, had a great time last night. Wish we could have stayed longer, winking face. Emily, me too, but you know how things are. Gotta keep it low-key. My hands went cold. I kept scrolling, hoping, praying that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But the deeper I went, the worse it got. There were photos, nothing explicit, but intimate enough to make my blood boil. A selfie of the two of them at a bar, her head resting on his shoulder. A close-up of their hands intertwined, fingers locked together. This wasn't just a flirtation. It wasn't just a joke. It was an affair. When Emily came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, I was waiting for her in the kitchen. Her phone sat on the table between us, the chat with Brad still open on the screen. She froze when she saw it. Care to explain this? I asked, my voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside me. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then, with a sigh, she dropped into a chair across from me, running a hand through her wet hair. "It's not what you think," she said, which was exactly what someone says when it's exactly what you think. "Then what is it?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been sleeping with him." Emily sighed again, as if she was the one who had the right to be tired. "It's complicated, okay? It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've been sneaking around with him for weeks. Maybe longer. How is that nothing?" She crossed her arms, her expression shifting from guilt to defiance. "Look, it was just supposed to be fun. It wasn't serious. And honestly, if you weren't so controlling, maybe I wouldn't have needed to find someone else." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, stunned. Controlling? I wasn't controlling. I was just trying to make sense of the mess she'd created. "So this is my fault now?" I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. She shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. "Maybe if you'd loosened up a little, we wouldn't be in this situation." That was the moment I knew there was no coming back from this. Emily wasn't sorry. She didn't even think she'd done anything wrong. In her mind, I was the problem. I was the one ruining everything by not going along with her games. I stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. You know what, Emily? If that's how you feel, then maybe you should be with Brad. Clearly, you care more about him than you do about this marriage. She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. It was just a fling. You'll get over it. But I couldn't. After that confrontation, things between us became unbearable. We lived in the same house, but we were strangers, silent ghosts passing by each other, pretending not to notice the growing chasm between us. She spent more and more nights out with Brad, coming home whenever she felt like it. I tried to act like it didn't bother me, but every time she left, it felt like another piece of me was being ripped away. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I was a shell of the man I used to be, consumed by the knowledge that the woman I loved was slowly slipping away from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. One night, after another long evening spent alone, I found myself scrolling through the photos on her phone again. There were so many moments, so many memories, tainted by the knowledge that she'd been unfaithful. Every photo, every message was a reminder of the life I thought we had, and the lie it had become. And then I found it, a video from the Halloween party. It wasn't anything explicit, just a short clip of her and Brad, laughing together in the kitchen. But the way she looked at him, it was the same way she used to look at me. That was when I knew it was over. I woke up the next morning in the same empty bed where I had spent too many lonely nights. The air in the room felt heavy, like every decision I'd put off was pressing down on my chest. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. How things had gotten so out of control, how my wife, the person I trusted most, had slowly become a stranger. The sound of Emily laughing with Brad at that Halloween party echoed in my mind like a broken record. Her words, the way she dismissed everything between us as if it never mattered, those memories haunted me. And what ate at me the most was realizing how she didn't even care enough to lie convincingly. She wore her betrayal like a badge. And the worst part was that she never apologized. Not once. That morning I knew I had a choice to make. I could stay in this broken relationship, pretending that things would magically fix themselves, or I could walk away before the pieces shattered beyond repair. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart heavy with the weight of what had to come next. I went into the closet, grabbed a duffel bag, and began packing. I didn't take much, just the essentials. I couldn't bring myself to stay under the same roof with her any longer. Every corner of the house felt tainted with memories of lies and betrayal. I was done being the fool who stayed when it was clear I wasn't wanted. When I walked into the living room, Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that this was the last morning we'd share together. She didn't even look up as I placed my bag by the door. It was like she had already checked out of our marriage, mentally and emotionally gone before I even made the decision to leave. "Emily," I said, my voice steady but hollow. "I'm leaving." She glanced up, her face blank with mild confusion. "Where are you going?" "Away," I replied. "I can't do this anymore." There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She shrugged. "You're being dramatic." Those words, spoken so casually, were the final nail in the coffin. After everything, her betrayal, her lies, the nights spent wondering where she was and who she was with, this was all I got. No apology, no regret, just indifference. Without another word, I picked up my bag and opened the front door. As I stepped outside, a wave of cold air hit me, and for the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. I didn't leave a note or say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. In the weeks that followed, life felt like a blur. I stayed with a friend for a while, just trying to catch my breath and make sense of everything. At first, I thought leaving Emily would be the hardest part, but it wasn't. The hardest part was waking up every day, knowing I'd been replaced, knowing she was probably with Brad, laughing, living her life as if nothing had happened. The silence was deafening. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from her. An apology, a plea for me to come back, something. But the phone stayed silent. There was no apology, no regret, just silence. And that silence spoke louder than any words ever could. It was like mourning someone who was still alive. I missed the version of her that I thought I knew, the woman I fell in love with, the woman I married. But that person didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. I spent a lot of time walking, just wandering the streets aimlessly. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to keep moving. The more I walked, the more I realized how small my world had become while I was married to Emily. I had wrapped my entire identity around her, around our relationship, and now that it was gone, I didn't know who I was anymore. I started going to therapy, something I never thought I'd do. At first, I felt ridiculous, sitting in a room with a stranger and spilling my guts. But as the sessions went on, I began to understand that what happened with Emily wasn't just about the affair. It was about control, manipulation, and the slow erosion of trust. It was about how I lost myself trying to be everything for someone who didn't appreciate me. The therapist told me that healing wasn't a straight line, that there would be days when I felt okay and days when I didn't want to get out of bed. She was right. Some days were easier than others, and some days the weight of it all still crushed me. But life, as they say, goes on. I found a new apartment, started reconnecting with old friends, and slowly, piece by piece, began rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to pick up the phone, call Emily, and ask her why she threw it all away, why she didn't even fight for us. But I knew that some questions would never have answers. One day, out of the blue, I got a message from a mutual friend who had been at the Halloween party. "Hey man, just wanted to say I'm sorry about everything. I heard Emily's with Brad now. Just wanted you to know. You deserve better." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, anger, relief. It all swirled together. But beneath it all, there was a small flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. 6 months later, I'm still a work in progress. I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to live with the scars. I still think about Emily sometimes, but not in the same way I used to. I don't wonder what she's doing or if she's happy. I don't check her social media or ask mutual friends about her. She's part of my past, and that's where she'll stay. I've also learned that happiness isn't something you find in someone else. It's something you build for yourself. It's in the little things. The morning runs, the coffee shop down the street where the barista knows my name, the quiet moments of peace I never had when I was with Emily. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't letting go of someone. It's letting go of the person you thought you had to be to keep them. As I sit here writing this, I realize that my story doesn't have a grand ending. There's no dramatic confrontation, no explosive revenge. Just a quiet, messy journey towards something new. And for the first time in a long time, I think I'm okay with that.